Now you have made a very nice link already between the intrapersonal and the interpersonal quest for svadyaya. In fact, like you cannot have one face of the internal part without the external reflections also. But still you have been focusing more on the internal virya, which is needed also. Now the question would be, what do you think of the virya in relationship to others, in living a yogic life or living a responsible life, which tries to not only think about svadyaya but put it into practice, and in a context where not only on the path of self-inquiry, but we somehow try to translate what you find in your self-inquiry in your daily interactions with others.
Well, here we come now, back to where we started in a way, because realizing that virya, heroism, courage, is almost synonymous with virtue. And that without virtue, there can be no heroism. And heroism is necessary for spiritual evolution. This also implies that we want to evolve spiritually. Now, the average person has no idea to evolve spiritually. We call such a person who wants to grow spiritually as an adhikara, an awakened soul, a fit person. Now, these are very rare. I would venture to say, if I had to give a percentage, that in a population of 1 million people, maybe maximum only 100 people out of 1 million would be awakened people who actually care, for whom this is important. We may find good people, we may find decent people who try to do their duty, or people who are quite polite, courteous, conditioned, very nice conditioned behavior, people who are conscious citizens and so forth. But truly awakened in the sense that the most important aspect of being alive is growing spiritually. That's going to be very rare. Now, first of all, to be in the minority like that requires a heroic personality. Because who wants to be alone? Who wants to be strange? Who wants to be considered different? Who wants to be the odd man out in any society? Nobody wants that. We all need esteem from others. We want others to respect us, others to value us. But very often, if our virtues or our values are spiritual values, in a materialistic society, they will not be valued. The virtues will not be valued in a materialistic society. The materialistic society will value material things, will value success in material endeavors, successful businessman, successful sportsman, successful actor, actress, a successful industrialist. They won't look into the type of character that that person has, which may have given them success. To be a successful sportsman, one has to be quite ruthless. To be the same is true in almost all materialistic endeavors. One has to be capable of elbowing everybody else out of the way and thinking only of oneself and pushing oneself forward. Now that is the value, that is the virtue of a materialistic man. Now if we have other virtues and other values, if we value quietude, for example, what materialistic person will give value to quietude? They have to have the radio on all the time. They have to have the TV on all the time. They have to be listening to music all the time. They have to be talking. They have to be gossiping. They will not value quietude. So our spiritual values will be very different, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says to Arjuna, what is day to the man of the world is night to the yogi. What is night to the man of the world is day to the yogi. In other words, the yogi, the Sufi, the Zen Buddhist, the monk, the spiritual aspirant, the mumuksha, that is the person who's seeking moksha, their view of life, their virtues will be totally opposite. Their values will be the opposite to the materialistic person, the man of the world. Now, how can such a person live in society? How is it possible to live in a society? How can such a man, if a husband is married to a woman, if a spiritual man is married to a worldly woman, how can the two live together? The husband may understand the woman, but she will never understand the man. The higher can always understand the lower. The lower can never understand the higher. A parent can understand the child, but the child can never understand the parent till he goes through that experience. I'm not using higher or lower in any type of a value judgment. It just means a different position in the long climb of the evolutionary mountain. Now, what to do? Because we are social beings also. And as was pointed out by yourself earlier in the discussion, we are now in a position on earth where every single thing we do is affecting everybody else. We cannot live in isolation anymore. But perhaps we can. Maybe that's also a wrong idea. We may underestimate the power of mind. Now, Ramana Maharishi in Tiruvannamalai, who was considered one of the great enlightened masters of the 20th century, never moved out of his mountain. He came to the mountain when he was about 12, Arunachala, and he lived there for 65 years, around 65 years. He never went away. He never did social work. He never interacted. He never went out and set up programs to help the community. He never was an environmentalist. Nothing. He simply lived his simple life as he saw fit, according to his realization. He simply was what he was. People came to him. He was open to it. He saw people, but he didn't always speak to them. Sometimes he would sit there without speaking for hours, and people would simply sit with him. His presence was so powerful that they felt uplifted by it. Now here's an example of a man who was a spiritual man filled with virtue. He was filled with beautiful virtues. Some of his sensitivity is remarkable according to the anecdotes which surround him. He was a perfect environmentalist. He never wasted anything, not even a stub of a pencil. He used all paper. He was very careful about everything he did, very careful about the material environment. He took utmost care in the very simple way he lived. He lived naturally. He had no needs. He didn't even wear clothes. He just wore a loincloth. Now, in his way, he was a great giving, a great power to the universe, simply by his presence. He was empowering people with his presence. His virtue had its own power, which did not have to be expressed. His virtue was embedded in his lifestyle, but he had created his own lifestyle. Now, what if he would have said, no, I have to go out and save the world. I have to go out and teach Vedanta. I have to go out, as so many gurus have done. I've got to go out and set up big organizations. I've got to have a big ashram. The people coming to me have to have comfort, so I have to create air-conditioned guest houses, and I've got to have sterile kitchens, and I've got to have the best of food. And the material becomes, the spiritual has to become materialized. He never did that. He stuck to his own value. He was a simple man who had realized the divine, and he lived a life perfectly in harmony with his realization, which is the ultimate of virtue. As someone had pointed out one night in satsang, that we can be perfectly virtuous only when we have achieved samadhi. And that is also something we thought about. That perfect virtue is only possible in perfect realization. Now, if we have achieved a high enough, the higher we go in a realized state, the more power we will have to create our own environment. And perhaps this is the only answer, because if someone who is well developed tries to go out and become a teacher in a government school in India, well, it will be very, very difficult. They'll probably be killed. They'll probably be fired. They'll probably be suspended. Or if one tries to get a job with a company who is very highly developed in virtue, how can such a person survive in that structure? It is like taking a fish out of water and saying, you're a highly evolved fish, now live on land. Or taking a lion out of the jungle and putting him in the water and saying, okay, you're the king of the beasts, now you live in the water. So virtue implies the power to create one's own environment. Then the interaction with the world can be on one's own terms. Within one's own environment, if one has perfected or come to a high degree of value in ahimsa, one can insist on the fact that those who exist in one's environment follow that. And one can also say, if you cannot follow that, you have no place here. One has that right. For example, in our ashram, I have every right to tell people they cannot smoke here. It is my environment. If I go sit in a hotel and someone smokes next to me, I have no power over that person. I cannot impose, come to a conclusion here.
Yes, so you nicely pointed out in a certain way, spaces need to be created. Yeah, actually, like virtue can happen.
That's part of virtue. Mm-hmm. Because virtue also means power. It doesn't mean weakness. Mm-hmm. Virtue means strength. Mm-hmm. Virtue means skill. This is a mistake that somehow in Western consciousness has crept in to identify virtue with weakness. And excuse me, but this is a Christian concept that was promulgated by the church. Because the church could have power over people who thought they were weak. So it was in the church's interest to make people feel they were weak and powerless. It's not just the church. All rulers, all dictators try to make the people feel weak so that they can have the power. So somehow, especially with Christianity, this idea that virtue is associated with weakness. Now that was never the case. That is a new idea. That virtue is powerful, virtue is skillful, virtue is intelligence. Without that, there's no virtue. If we have these qualities, we can create our own space. We can allow those who are able to conform to this virtue into that space, but we do not have to allow those who cannot conform to that virtue in that space. So we can create an ashram, and we can say to people, as long, this is my space. If you can conform to my space, you are welcome here. But if you are not able to conform, then you cannot live here. And I have every right because I've created it. Now, this is an important thing for virtuous people to realize. We have the right to exclude those who cannot conform to us. And you may say, oh, but what if those persons could teach us a lesson? Well, that's where wisdom has to come in. Discrimination comes in. Is it our ego saying you can't come into my space, such as this little ego? That's my bucket. No, I want it. Is it that primitive, crude ego? Or is it that enlightened soul that says, if I allow you here, you're going to spoil it. And I don't want you to commit the sin of spoiling something. And so therefore I keep you out for your own good. Or it's the person who says, I don't steal, but I cannot allow circumstances to be created that will allow you to steal. So if I've got my space and I have people coming into that space, I have to create a space which will not create circumstances which allow people to steal. I should not allow people to steal from me. I should not steal. I should not allow people to steal from me. I should not harm. I should not allow others to harm me. I should tell the truth. I should not allow others to tell untruth to me. And that is a crucial point, because if we allow others to steal from us, they will interpret that as our weakness. And they will attack us and destroy us. And what is the point? Then we have allowed them to commit the sin of destroying us. So we are equally guilty. We have given the opening for those negative, lower, animalistic, bestial impulses to manifest. And we are at fault. So part of virtue is not allowing others in relationship to us to violate virtue. Now how far does that extend? That's another crucial point. If we are living in a community, say in a village or in a city, we live in Pondicherry, do I have to go out and fight every single battle? Is that part of virtue? I know the roads are in terrible shape. I know there's corruption in the government. I know that the money that should be spent on keeping up the schools is going into people's pockets. As part of virtue and courage, should I go out and fight those fights? That depends. on the person. There's no general rule for that. For some people it's their swadharma. For Mahatma Gandhi it was his swadharma to go out and fight the British. That was his sadhana. For some people, we have environmentalists here, Meda Patwar comes to mind. Her whole life is fighting for the environment. That is her swadharma. That is virtuous. That is her swadharma. There are people who will go out and fight to get good roads. That is their swadharma. That is their virtue. So virtue also implies knowing ourselves, knowing what is our role in the society. Now what is our nature? We have to know our nature also. There are some people who have this rajasic warrior desire and they have to go out and fight. Some people are sattvic by nature. They don't have that desire. So their duty perhaps is to create spaces where people can come and be quiet, where people can come and practice yoga, where people can come and study philosophy. This is not escapism. Then once they've created that space, their swadharma is to protect that space. And they have every right to not allow disruptive forces who might violate their code of conduct into that space. If one has a family, one has every right to protect that family. I know women whose husband is being seduced by another woman and they say, oh, what can I do? They want each other, I can't stand in the way of their love. I feel that is wrong. One has every right to protect one's relationship in dharma with another person. The woman has every right to prevent that other woman from stealing her husband, because that woman will be committing a sin by taking her husband. So in the end, by standing up for our own rights, we should be protecting virtue. Now when by standing up for our rights we protect virtue, then it is correct.
There's one interesting and important point that you just made now, because the whole first part when we're talking about virtue and courage was to link it to the very important notion of svadyaya, and now we're just coming to this other aspect which you have been pointing to in satsanga. You were saying that maybe the two most important things are the dharma and the svadyaya.
Yes.
And actually here we didn't talk about dharma generally, but
Yes.
svadharma, so which
Yes.
is dharma understood already, the own dharma understood through the svadyaya.
Yes.
And so I wonder, like, to what extent courage is not like to take on one's own svadharma, but
Yes,
first to explore it and then to carry it out.
Yes. That is also part of courage, to realize this is like my swadharma. I have found my swadharma. I am doing what I feel I was destined to do. And I'm not trying to become something else. Someone asked me last summer, why don't, we respect you because you're not trying to form a big organization and take over the world. I said, I have no desire to do that. That is not my swadharma. My calling is to work with small groups in my small way, in this small place. I have no desire to go out and have organizations all over the world and set up seminars and go around and teach people. This is my swadharma. I'm very fortunate. I found it. Now, in one way, it's not even, this is where we come to the point where all virtue becomes sahaj, or natural. It looks like courage on the outside. It's not courage. It looks like sacrifice. There's nothing. It's just natural. So in the end, virtue becomes natural. People say, oh, you're so good. You're not good. That's natural for you. You have no other way to act. You have no alternative. That's the way it is. You're kind because you're kind, not because you want to be kind or any other reason. You are sensitive because you've developed that sensitivity. And it's not that you are having to restrain anything. So at the highest level of sattvic virtue, it becomes sahaj, becomes natural. At the highest level of dharma, it becomes swadharma, it becomes your natural. It's natural to you. It's as natural as breathing. There's no question of conscious courage. It's just, when you get firmly established in svadyaya, there's no question even of courage, because it's natural for you to want to know about yourself. Oh, how interesting, I didn't know that was still there. How interesting, I see this ego there, I didn't realize it was there. There's no courage in facing it, because it's just, you're looking. What courage is it to look out and see the tree? One has developed this quality, and perhaps we could also add that along with discretion, discretion is the better part of valor, we could say that detached observation is also the height of courage.
Maybe to make a link with what we have been talking about before we started actually, like the interview, this link between courage and the core, or in French, cœur, the heart.
Yes.
Maybe what appears from outside as courage is just from inside that what comes from the heart,
It's
or
coming from the heart.
Sat.
But when we say heart, we're not, but see, this is a problem with that.
Yeah,
Is
Sat.
this, we associate emotions, animal emotions, with love and heart. We have to break down that concept and realize that the real heart means the core of being. And it's not, doesn't necessarily have an emotional valence, in the sense of, you feel love for somebody and you feel the surge of emotion, or you feel anger and you feel the surge of emotion, or you feel affection and you feel the surge of emotion. People are quite addicted to these emotional surges, which really are only connected to the mammalian brain. But when we talk about heart, meaning the core of the being, when we come to the core of anything, and we are in resonance with that, then everything we do will be natural. And then we'll just be naturally courageous. We won't have to think about it. It won't take any effort. That our whole being will be in that moment. And if we're required to run into the fire, we won't even think, should I run or not? Or there's nothing. We just do. Or if somebody falls down, we pick them up. We just do. We have something, we share it. We just do it. There's no question of virtue in it. Virtue becomes redundant at that level. We even transcend sattvas. We go into the nirgunic state, where there's no virtue. We can say there's still virtue, vice in the sattvic state. There's still courage in the sattvic state. But when we transcend all the gunas into the nirgunic state, which is the highest level, there's no morality, there's no ethics, there's nothing. There's just the Tao, as the Taoists like to say. One is simply in the flow, that's all. Or one is simply in Dharma. One is simply resting in Atman. One is simply in that great oneness. And then everything is virtuous. Even if you kill another person, it can be an act of virtue. Even if you're angry, it's still an act of virtue, because that is the appropriate action in that situation. This is why Arjuna, Krishna can tell Arjuna, go out and kill your father, go out and kill your grandfather, go out and kill your cousins, go out and kill your teachers. How can that be virtuous? The God of all creation is telling the disciple, go kill your own grandfather. Because he's totally out of the zone of ego. He just becomes instrument of that divine flux, where what happens is happening. Now that is the height of virtue, where there's no virtue. There's no courage, there's just, one is in the moment, flowing and doing what is there to do at that moment. And that changes from moment to moment. But that type of idea is very dangerous, because it can be used by the lower man to justify violent actions and to justify vice. And that is what's happened in modern times, ironically. This sense of permissiveness, the sense of relativity has been twisted to say situational ethics. We can do what the situation demands. But mainly that implies that whatever I really want in the core of my heart, I'm going to do. So that's where one has to know oneself to the perfection. And we're not just satisfying our ego. Oh, I have to go with this woman because I have to leave my wife because this other woman and I are pursuing the spiritual life together. And so we justify all these lower activities with a higher motivation, and in the name of relativity and situational ethics. So we have to be very, very careful. That's a very high idea, and only very few can exist in that state. So until we get to that state, we have to obey some of these more mundane ideas of virtue and heroism. That prepares us for that final state, when we just let go of everything and our very being is virtuous. Every action is virtuous, every action is courageous, every action is right. And that is a very high state. So the lion roars, as you like your metaphor. The lion roars because it's a lion and its svadharma is to roar. The lion pounces on a deer. Because its svadharma is to pounce on a deer. And in the great chain of events, that is totally correct and right. And that roar of courage for a lion is not courageous. That's his nature. So we have to evolve ourselves till all these so-called high virtues and these high qualities are actually our nature.
Thank you very much, Amma. Especially for so much time.
It's okay. It's fun. As I told you, you help me think, and it's enjoyable to explore these thoughts.